Have you ever played a browser game and wondered what went into it? What was that process like? How do you take the seed of an idea and turn it into a full game? Usually in a browser-based game, you're trying to make things in the span of weeks or months. You're usually not putting years of effort into it except for a few huge exceptions. I used to make Flash games quite regularly when I was about 15, 16. The older I got starting university, I didn't really have time for it anymore. Sometime around, I want to say 2010, I started this game, intended to be Newgrounds Snowboarding. I didn't make it very far into the process before it kind of just sat in some folders in multiple computers. I've carried this with me for years, always hoping that someday I would actually make this game. Newgrounds Snowboarding officially released 1 year ago, going from this crappy little starting demo you see to a fully playable game. A little over a year ago, when I decided now was the time I was finally gonna make this game, I connected with a programmer, a second artist, and we got to work on this thing. And because I now have a YouTube channel, I decided I should film small little dev updates along the way so people can see the way that a small game with a simple idea gets iterated and changed, and the small compromises you have to make along the way. Here's the game you want to make, here's the game you end up releasing, that sort of thing. I thought it would be fun to document the process, and I thought people might want to see that little peek behind the curtain. And now 1 year later, I had an empty slot in my schedule and decided I should probably put those together and share this mini documentary of the process of making Newgrounds Snowboarding, a game that took 10 years to make, but realistically only took a couple weeks of actual effort. I did my best to make things as engaging as possible, but it's a super low-key video because I'm trying to show things in quite a bit of depth. What it looks like from the developer's perspective, the small little things you spend your days on, and how that all adds up to a finished game. I'm so happy to finally have it released. I'm very happy to have this video released, so I hope you guys genuinely enjoy it. Always in the bottom right corner there, I'll have the day that specific update was coming from, so you can kind of see the timeline as things progressed. And with that, let's get going. I have a little bit of a project on the go here that dates back to 2010. So over 10 years in the making, which is just brutal. And I just thought it was a fun little idea, started throwing it together, playing around with things. There's all these games out there like Newgrounds Rumble or Portal Defenders that have these really fun ways of bringing together a bunch of fun Flash animation and game characters. And I wanted something like that. I thought this would be a fun holiday season game to put together. I've always been a fan of downhill snowboarding on Newgrounds, and I really wanted the game to be like that. I no longer think that's the direction it's truly going in. I don't think it'll look like that anymore. But back in the day, that was what I had in mind for this. I started drawing up characters. I had maybe talked to someone about working on it together, but we never really had any firm plans about anything. And now a couple months ago, probably back in September or October, I put out a post just saying hey, I have all this art I did for a game 10 years ago, which is just, that makes me want to throw up in my mouth. That's insane. That's insane to think. But I was like, I want to do something with it still. I talked to a few different developers, and eventually I landed on working with MSGHero. We just kind of clicked right away. We had a chat where we bounced around some ideas. We quickly went away from downhill snowboarding as the primary influence. You know, it would be cool to start this game jam from nothing and show you how it progressed from there. Obviously, we have some ideas already mapped out. We're kind of also doing it asynchronously. I'm really committing this weekend. MSG is probably going to have to do next weekend. And so there's going to be a lot of art stuff and then a lot of prototyping to show off, and they're going to come at different times. So it's a shame that they're not coming together like that, and it's kind of like one and then the other comes to meet, but there'll still be some interesting stuff to show. We've been talking about Alto's Adventure as a pretty good golden standard of an auto runner snowboarding skiing based game. It's really well done, really polished. I don't know if we'll achieve that level of polish. I don't know if we're really aiming for that, but maybe something that at least has that level of fun to it that makes you want to keep playing. Probably we're going to want it to be a little bit more action-packed, a little bit more fun. Newgrounds has always been a little edgy or whatever. And so if Alto's adventure is like this nice, peaceful, ooh, we're going skiing, then Newgrounds Snowboarding is going to be like, yeah, we're going snowboarding. It's going to be epic. Thrash, metal, awesome, dude. That's what I'm picturing, at least. The game started to take shape quickly, and things felt good, and we started working on this. Not a lot of time put in over the course of several months, and we just kind of decided if this is going to happen, it almost has to be done as like a personal game jam. We just need to set aside a few days, like 2 to 3 if we can, and just hammer this out. Over the next few days here, I'm going to be documenting any additional progress that I make in this game, document some of the progress and the prototypes along the way, because I think people might be interested to see how these games start to take shape. I won't be able to like show off any programming because it's not my thing. And when it's done, it'll be this free online web game, and it'll just feel great to put out a new game, which is something I haven't done in a long, long time. And yeah, I'm just excited about that in a lot of ways. All of this are characters that had already been done 10 years ago. Pico, like one of the primary mascots of Newgrounds. I should just say I got permission for all these characters. I wanted to be really particular about that. I didn't want to just grab randos, but everyone was so awesome about it. Like, everyone got back to me and everyone said yes, which is super cool. More characters to come. This is just the start. This is the King from Edible Castle, a series of animations I love. A really funny thing with this game, they were a big deal 10 years ago. They kind of don't do much anymore. Every character gets a tail grab and a nose grab. That's really standard. And you can see all these different layers. I guess people might just be curious about some of that sort of stuff. Different layers that are breaking up the different parts of the character. So you can see I have the head, arm, body, other arm, shoes, pants, and snowboard all on different layers. I've had to change this a little bit since, and it's going to be probably the first thing I focus on when I really get going on this in earnest. That's just not going to work based on the way we're planning on programming the game. And so, I cheat on things a little bit where his body just kind of slides and moves, but you see, I have to do the pants frame by frame. They have to be redrawn every time. One of the arms is redrawn. But the head, the head is its own movie clip. It's its own layered object where you have 2 different components to it. So you can move the entire head. There's no need for that to be separated in any way. So that's kind of the gist of it. You have a set of frames that set it into a nose grab. You would then hold the nose grab, and a set of frames that put you back out of it. And that's the general principle for how all of these would be animated. You then have really simple leans, just while you have your little control over the character. The idea is that you'd have a few different skills and tricks to earn points and things. We have a color alternate, which we thought might just be like a fun idea. Well, I say this is an idea I had 10 years ago. We'll see if that makes it in the final game. I think that'll be interesting to see what kind of things get cut. There's no jump animation currently, and we're still circling the idea of if jumps are going to be manual inputs or if they're going to be driven entirely by the physics of going down the slopes in the game. We want the slopes to be procedurally generated, so not predefined slopes, and that will make it more of like an endless runner feel, and that will make a small little online game feel like a lot more than it originally would. Each character is intended to have a unique move, and I tried my best to make them like thematic. So Pico does a little method, which that's just, I don't know, he's just a cool dude, cool snowboarder, and I gave him a cool looking flashy move. Any one of these characters is just going to have their own iteration of those basic leans and grabs. I got him to do Lemon because the king is kind of a silly character, and I thought Lemon was a silly sounding trick to do. This is my own goat character. He does a 360 entirely because I already had the 360 of his head, and that was just me like demoing, practicing, drawing the character from different angles, and so I just turned that into a 360. This became more of his standard like 2/3 rotation look, whereas here the facing straight to the side is more like he would have first appeared in the Goat Trip animation. And so that's, or 10 Ways to Die, I guess, would have been his original appearance. That's why he's there. That's just my own original character. I have Chocolate Man and Cripple Boy, which is from the Nameless series by Lazy Muffin, but another really big deal of an animation series. This is Johnny from Skater V2, from Marcy, or I think it might be Marky Van Flatten, which are just an awesome set of animators. Again, this was a big deal 10 years ago. The Van Flatten twins have their own YouTube channel where they do twin trash, and they're incredible. They have grown so much. They're just phenomenal animators. This is the Boogly, who is specifically an animator himself, and this is kind of an OC that he had. I really was a fan of all the things the Boogly did. He's another one who's kind of disappeared, but I kind of like that this game is now going to have these characters who were a big deal that much longer ago. We have Tank Man. He is a stiffy because I just thought that was funny. There's a lot of, dick jokes in the Tankman series. And I tried my best to make them be like real moves from snowboarding games, or from snowboarding as a sport, I should say. I had the idea of making an original character that you start out as and you unlock the other characters. That was 10 years ago. Who knows if that character will make it into the final game. I have a few placeholders for things, but I also have made notes of things here. At this particular stage, these that are already in there, I've had permission for Henry Stickmin, Phil Eggtree, and Chippy Knight. Chippy Knight is something MSGHero specifically requested. I had also gotten permission for Blue Rabbit from the Super Flash Bros, and I reached out for some of these other ones. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if I actually have confirmation on any of those. I would love for all of them to be able to make it into the game. We'll see how things go. That might be too many characters. That might be too much to bite off in the time we've given ourselves. I'd started putting together this character select screen, which I was pretty proud of how it was looking so far. The aspect ratio of it is very dumb. I don't think we'll be sticking with that, so I'll probably have to redesign it. But I just thought there's some cool layers in there that give some nice effects. There's like the frost and just like a little bit of design flair there. But I'm also largely borrowing this from Newgrounds Rumble. I just really liked what they had going on there. It's very distinct, and it just works well. But I didn't think the rusty metal or anything would really fit the game that well, so I kind of have this, I guess, frosted metal. There's a little bit of a Newgrounds tank in the background, a description, what they come from. That'll be a link that you can then go to like their Newgrounds page. Maybe characters will have stats. I think that would be fun. We'll totally see how that goes. Everyone has this really generic white snowboard because you'll be able to unlock different board designs, and that is a huge oversight from me, is that you can't animate these characters with the boards locked in like that. Just the way we're working through things, the idea is that it would be its own separate movie clip, and then in each one of these frames you would add a new unique design, and then you would be able to just swap those out. But the way we're building the game, it's not going to work like that, and I should have anticipated that having the board linked to the character like that baked into the animation was a mistake, and that was a huge oversight on my part. I've since had to redo all that, and so now rather than the board flipping up and Pico grabbing the edge of the board, the animation is now redone, so all the moves exist in this one timeline, this one movie clip, and there's not those weird gap frames or anything, and everything happens with his feet being planted so that the board can always exist underneath him, and any rotating or anything would instead be done in the code. So I've done quite a bit of animating for these characters, and I now have to tweak and alter it to fit with their feet staying planted rather than how I had done it before, which stinks. But I can at least salvage a fair amount of the work I did. It's just going to be a pain in the butt. I at least have one character down. That's something I did a month ago. Oh, look at this sweet thing that I did. That is like a traced image of a snowboarder that I then colored to look like Pico. I don't know if that'll make it into the final game. I don't know if that'll stay, but I thought that was like a fun little intro for the main menu. I largely still like it, so who knows, maybe that logo and everything will still stay. And about the one other bit of art I have to show is something I did a little while back. This would have been months ago, not 10 years ago, is a set of tiles that have all these different slopes to them. The idea is that they would then be chained together. They should easily be stitched together within the code so that you have these rolling generated slopes, we're going to play around with the idea of also having some pre-built slopes so that you can have cool little extra moments that are more than just kind of random nothing. We'll see if that makes it in. We'll see how that plays out. I may end up redoing some of these. They're really inconsistent in their style. I don't know how much I like it. We'll see. This is a little doodle I used to try and communicate what I had visioned for how the slopes would be generated. You would have one line that is the primary axis, and then slope segments are added and subtracted and to make the actual curves there. And so it really depends how wide you want to make each segment. Like this is roughly drawn, it's not anything precise, whereas the actual tiles that I have are all the exact same pixel width so that they can line up one after the other. And yeah, that was just a quick way of, we were talking through things. MSG was talking in math and programming, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm an animator, I don't know any of this. You know, this game is not a SWF, it's not a Flash game technically, and so it should work fine. Yeah, so right now this is what we have in the code. The mapping of it is a little messed up. I did my art a little bit wrong, and so everything is just these, you can see all these gaps in it and everything, and it's really messed up. And right now, MSG is just playing with it in this flat variant where, rather than adding an actual slope and progressing in that way, you can see speed almost like infinitely builds up right now, and eventually things kind of come crashing down because of that. It also is using mathematics to determine additional slopes to make sure that it doesn't join together two things that are mismatched to create like an impassable slope. Impossible and impassable. You'll even see right here at the beginning it's all flat, 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 and then it starts calculating like what the slopes would or could be. And if I run this a few times, sometimes because of the way it calculates the plus and minuses, it'll drift down out of screen or up out of screen, and all of that will be tweaked and everything. This is just like an early pass at that math. And so this is part of why we don't know if it would be worth it to have a jump button, is that the way that your character rides along the slope and bounces off of the generated ramps, it sends you up into the air as is. And if things are going really fast, we don't know if being able to jump will really work. It might interfere more than anything. We're going to try to award trick points, and or maybe collectibles on screen or something, and you spend that in the store to unlock other characters. Yeah, this is like the second demo build. I don't believe I have the original one anymore. Quick visual aid got us on the same page. This is all there is to show of that original version. That was just a line version of things. This one was angled, actually. I do remember that, rather than being flat. And that just kind of complicates things because all the calculations are being made on an angle. Whereas now that it's flat, he can make all the calculations relative to 0, and then after the calculations made, rotate it, and that's just an easier approach. It makes sense. This blue line was like a center line that the red dot was always trying to return to, but there was some goofy math where now and again you'd get like a huge drop off like that. I don't have this to show anymore, but it gives you a sense of how basic it started. Yeah, I think it's already been overwritten. It was essentially the same thing, but just with lines instead of drawn tiles. Here's part of the way that MSG was playing around with handling the sprites I was giving him, and this is different than any way I've ever worked with this stuff, so we kind of have to learn a little bit from whoever you're working with. Just because you prepared sprites and animations in a specific way for one project doesn't mean it's going to work for the next thing you work on. And I don't even remember if we ended up sticking with this Atlas way of doing things. But you kind of have to find a way that you're both comfortable working in and then compromise a little on each side. And so the fact that I had already started the artwork and everything is not great for that reason. It means, I now have to redo some things, but just kind of an interesting behind the scenes. You shouldn't expect going into a project of two randomly paired people online that you're both going to have the exact same vision just for how to build the game, let alone for what the end result will be. We played around with doing sprite sheets instead, which is something I have done, and I don't think it worked quite properly with the way the game's being built. Here's more visual aid stuff. You have those individual width tiles that are going to be moving past the screen. And when you lay a bunch of them next to each other like this, you just have this wall of purple that just looks ugly and bad. And so my suggestion here was that we have this alternate bit of a texture and drawn out objects that move independently of the tiles overlaid on them. And some of them would be directly on, some of them would overlap, and it would help break up the tile pieces and create this illusion that they were continuous rather than seeing the individual separations. Because here when you line them up, even though you do what you can to make sure this and this line up perfectly, each segment when put next to one another creates a continuous piece of art. You can see all those, I'm going to point at the screen, all those white, blue, and purple segments there all start and end at the same point so that they can stitch together. That starts to look really obvious. And so you try to layer other things on top of it to hide that a little bit. We'll see if it works how I'm imagining. You got to play around with the math a little bit and set certain limitations and set it so that it's always trying to return to 0. And the further that slope gets away from 0, the increased likelihood that it flattens back out again, because you want to avoid having crazy things like that happen. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I don't know how many different check-ins I'm going to do and all that. But it's been 10 years in the making, so I'm kind of okay if it's a little bit longer of a video. I hope it'll be genuinely interesting to people kind of seeing how some of this stuff comes together. So this is my starting point. I got 10-year-old art on the line, a few more recent tiles, and we've been talking a bit about how the final game is going to feel. So now we're just going to start hammering out art, throwing together some prototypes, and seeing if we can get it together in a reasonable amount of time. Because in my mind, February is still a part of winter, especially since I live in Canada. March, we're officially entering spring, and at that point the game's gonna feel really out of place. So I would love to get it together sometime before the end of February. It should be done sooner than that. I mean, by the time, this is an interesting time capsule for me, because by the time this video comes out, the game will be done and ready to show. So, link in the description. Go check that out. That last little bit I would have shown was recorded a week ago. I ended up having to switch weekends and work on this at a different time than I had originally intended. I have a few quick demos from MSG here. Basically, we have an actual character in the game. You can see that they auto-adjust their angle when hitting the ground, and that seems to be starting to function. Now, there's another build that came after that, pretty close together. I'm showing both of them where you can actually start to rotate the character. Things are a little rocky there where, you're trying to rotate the character and then you auto match the angle of the ground that you touch, and there's not much in place actually checking to see if you've successfully landed at an angle that wouldn't cause a wipeout. Hopefully that will be how it works in the end, is that if you kind of are completely landing like this, then your character takes a spill. Yeah, there's going to be some tweaking to get it there. And as I'm showing in a bit of like a speed montage here, basically all I'm working on is cleaning up those sprites so that their feet remain in place and everything moves around that instead of the snowboard moving with everyone. I explained why I have to change that. Luckily, I realized I don't have to do anything with the leaning animations. I basically just have to do it for their tricks. And as you can see, there's like a little bit of a cheat with the going in to an animation and out of. All I'm doing is taking 5 frames of animation to do an in. Then there's a holding frame where you're just holding on to that trick. And then when you go out of it, I copy those same frames, reverse them, and remove the second frame, because on the in animation, there's these incremental steps of you start here, then here, and as you get closer to that final step, you're barely moving at all. Like the increments decrease. And so when you're undoing it, if you just reverse those frames, there would be an ease in. I guess it would be, because it would be 2 really barely changed frames and then big, and bigger. So if I remove that second frame, it's only big. And that's just a quick little trick that you come out of things quicker than you go into them. I think it just looks a tiny bit smoother and makes more sense and saves me some effort. So that's mostly what I'm working on. I'm looking forward to finally drawing up some of the new characters again. Oh wait, I got another build here. There's a little bit of animation. Right now it's literally only for leaning left, but we're just kind of trying to try things out. It doesn't have a lot of weight to it. I don't know if it looks that great, but really the main things that we're starting to think about and focus on is the character is definitely too big. You have no opportunity to see what's going on underneath you. The reaction of the character is weird. There's like an accidental, the way the math is done in the game, there's a limitation that as you're rotating, the further off that central axis you get, the more the game starts to limit your ability to rotate. Whereas we want one of the tricks you can do to be flipping, so you need to be able to continuously rotate if you choose to. So there's something going on there that needs to be tweaked. I think we're also realizing the chunks of tiles are just too big, and that when you end up with these crazy angles back to back, it's just impossible to react to, and the terrain is just really disinteresting. I probably am going to set aside working on new characters for a second, and instead I'm going to redo the tiles, make them narrower, and probably more angles. The number of angles currently creating this environment is obviously not enough. We need more variety than that. So a couple quick things at the end of another day here. Didn't get to put as much time into it as I wanted. That seems to be a recurring theme. Probably stretching this game jam out into like intense hour chunks across like an entire week instead of 2 blitz days like we had hoped it would be. There was lots of issues with the way we were assembling the sprites and everything. It turns out MSG was able to simply get a trial for the newest version of Flash, and we're just doing it all in Flash, which is nice because it gets to feel like a Flash game again, even though it's, not going to run using Flash Player. I hated the waiting of the animation, and it's too late to 100% redo it. I should open up the old version for a comparison. So what we would have just seen very recently, it's a pretty subtle lean backwards and forwards. It looks significant here. I say subtle, it looks like a lot of movement. As we saw in game, it looks like nothing. So I basically just had to do some squash and stretch. It's been a long day to try and push things that little bit further. You can see a tiny bit more in the lean there. So there you can see it's quite a bit more of the lean, and that's the same end frame. So the lean has been greatly exaggerated. Hopefully that looks a bit better. So I had to tweak that for every character. I tweaked the leans to be more exaggerated for every character. The way we're handling the framing and the frame labels and all that within the MCs, the movie clips, which, when you're nested inside one another, it's a movie clip. The way we renamed all that and redid all that was very different now that we're working in Flash. I spent a few hours redoing that sort of stuff. But now we have 7 fully complete, ready-to-use characters. I haven't done any new characters from what had been done 10 years ago, which is a bummer. But, I just had to make sure they were all working the way they were supposed to, getting the animations adjusted in various different ways. Yeah, I wish there was more to show there. I'm excited for the insane, crazy, fun lineup of other characters that are confirmed to be a part of this. 10 characters is pretty good if we don't manage to get any others. And, specifically a few of these are very important to myself. I'm so excited that Henry and Phil have permission to be in this game. That's going to be so great. I have a lot of work to do with remaking the tiles and stuff for the game. That's going to have to be the next thing I focused most heavily on. Next is the latest build that I received. It's kind of our end of the day, just like checkup of where things are at. And MSG sent me the build with the message, when you test your demo and you smile at how it feels, that's amore. So this is with quite a few of the variables tweaked. He had talked about putting physical dials into the game so we could adjust the gravity and the weight and the jumping and the rotation and things like that just to get accustomed to them. Oh, he's starting to play around with tricks actually. So when you come off of a jump, you still have that rotation. You can perform a full flip. It's never going to clip you or knock you out. But you can also do a trick as well as rotating, which the plan will be, the weighting of that should work out that if you were to rotate counterclockwise with a tail grab like that, then it would actually speed up your rotation because you're kind of just tucking in. And if you were to do a nose grab, see, I think we kind of have the inverse there. Doing a nose grab right now, maybe that makes sense. I'm gonna have to look at some real snowboarding. Yeah, because right now doing a nose grab on the counterclockwise speeds you up. Cool, so that did make it into game. I gotta go study real snowboarding physics and figure out if that's correct. I just had another message actually come in, and this is not the updated sprite. So this is still the old leaning where you can barely notice. I think it's just the fact that your character is rotating as you're executing that. There's also the method, the extra little move that you can do there, which is cool. We want to have like Tony Hawk style things popping up on the bottom. It's exciting. It's exciting to see game elements starting to come in, like the tricks. I'm providing some commentary on this after. I recorded this for about an hour, and I'm just kind of speeding through. The tiles needed to be redone. I can even show you the original reference image I had of what I wanted these tiles to look like, and they just didn't. It looked dumb. I didn't like it, and I wanted to redo it. Plus, we just decided we wanted to have thinner tiles. I play around with those values quite a lot, trying to get a feel for what seems right. It's hard to picture. I ended up going for 1/3. They're 33.3 pixels wide, and instantly I just, as soon as I was done recording this, I was like, that's stupid. That's going to make it so much harder on the programming end to have a decimal value like that. I might have to do some minor little tweaks. I do a little thing here where I insert a line in the first frame. I want there to be 15 increments of slope. At the end of that motion tween, I set the rotation to 60, 15 frames, 60 degrees. Each frame is a 4-degree increase to the slope. We kind of just decided that something around 60 would be steep enough. That was the same way I did it with the previous tile set. I then completely changed the way I was doing the snow caps. It is now an entirely separate movie clip, and the idea is that it's slightly wider than the base tile, so the base tiles should be snug up against one another, and that'll get rid of having any seams. We might even fake it that they overlap by like a pixel or something, just to get rid of those seams. Then the snow cap is slightly wider, and I have to tinker with this for like half an hour because it's with the increasing slope, that line, Pythagoras theorem becomes longer, so the width of the snow cap has to change a bunch. And hopefully with that changing width, that creates a situation where the snow caps overlap. Each snow cap has a bunch of different frames in it that can be randomized, so the tiles always look different. I then have an entirely different way of masking in a shadow rather than trying to hand draw in a cast shadow. It kind of works. We'll have to see it in engine. I realized really quickly that this is something I had already done. It's a lesson I had already learned once in the first tile set, is that you can't just have the square, because the slope, when it gets too steep, is cutting through the bottom of the square. And as soon as you have that, you have to make that tile longer so that the slope doesn't cut through the bottom of this, otherwise they'll never stitch together properly. So I had to relearn that lesson a second time, make that tile taller so I can better do that. I have to completely redo a bunch of things, cut new angles into it, resize a bunch of different things. But at the end, I think I have a usable tile that'll give us much more flexibility than the old one, and I think it'll just look better. I then had to make it much taller so that it continues out the bottom of the screen every time it spawns in a new tile while it's drawing out the ramps and everything in the game. I kept adding a small little amount, and I was like, probably has to be taller. Adding a small amount, it probably has to be taller. I did that like 30 times, and it's very stupid waste. But then, as an example of what this should eventually look like, you stitch together all of these tiles. You set that top left quarter as like the connection points that they connect together as seamlessly as possible. A few randomized things, you lay those out as if it was actual generated slopes in the game. And then I drew out these additional rocks, these doodads and decorative features that I think I had showed this before, then paste on top of the tiles and hide the fact that there's seams in the tiles and just make it look a little less boring than just this flat bluish purple color throughout. So I don't know if it's perfect. I'm definitely gonna have to wait to see how it looks in game, but I'm much happier with this. I think this was all a move in the right direction. Obviously, development on this game didn't take place in one short blitz the way we kind of thought it might. Now it's these little mini stretches of really focused effort, trying to put in like a chunk of an afternoon or one entire evening when we can, whatever we can do really. But I'm really excited that I'm documenting this process because it's so much more iterative than I remember any other game I've worked on being. At this rate, it's probably not going to come out in time for the winter, but I don't even care right now because it's fun and interesting. So the last thing I did was make all those new tiles. It's a shame that was so time intensive, but I can't even be mad because what MSG did next is so cool. He found a way to now pull from your graphics card to instead draw infinite iterations of slopes for this game. So now none of the terrain is hand-drawn. This is infinitely random. So, there's no nice even slopes going on. You really bounce around on the cliff. Maybe the weights and the acceleration aren't quite right. But, you're actually going down slope now. And without having to mess around with tiles or terrain anymore, we have that essentially locked. You can see now the more emphasized weights of the animation have been put in. I'm very happy with how that's looking. It's much, much better. You can actually tell. It also became apparent that the game was stopping you from rotating like left then right then left quick in any sort of quick succession because it would forcibly play the entire out animation and then it would let you initiate the next in. So if you're rotating left, it would stop you from rotating right while it then finished that resetting animation to him standing upright on the board. Then you'd have to hit right again. That was totally messy and didn't feel good. That's been corrected. But yeah, the main thing now is that we're on the third version of this terrain. I guess fourth if you include just flat lines. But this is probably the one that's going to stay. And my tiles might not necessarily go entirely out the window, because we might use them to hand draw segments when you want to have a really cool jump at the end of something or a unique piece of terrain that you can interact with. That probably needs to be predetermined, but then those will get chained together with randomly drawn environments, which, once we set parameters on them, they won't be 100% random. But that should keep the game feeling infinitely fresh and unique. And my little snow caps aren't necessarily going away. We're still going to utilize them. The same way that you build a 3D model of something and then wrap a texture around it, we now have these 2D slopes, and we're going to wrap the texture of the snow along the top of it. So yeah, the fact that I added that variability in the snow is really useful because that'll be our new caps. Yeah, so in one major update, everything is completely changed. We're totally on a new path. Yet, now the game is a step closer to what we always wanted it to be or thought it could be. Game dev can just be so cool. I hope there's some good lessons in here. Not all that long ago, I probably would have been upset about that sort of work getting tossed out the window. And we're kind of salvaging it here. But even just on this one project, I feel like I'm really learning about being adaptable, knowing what should be kept and thrown out and reworked. When an idea is simply better for the game rather than any personal attachments, it's really satisfying. I'm looking forward to some more dramatic leaps and bounds in the different builds coming down the pipeline. I had to sneeze through that whole sentence and it felt terrible. I have some art that I actually did like a week ago at this point. I planned to just have it as a time lapse. I realized I never properly did the commentary for it. I'm primarily drawing new characters here. And first up, I was trying to use my tablet. I've had this one for something like 7 years and it's just totally pooched. It kind of works, but I get these jagged, annoying lines. Nothing on it looks smooth. I tried recalibrating it with pen mode and mouse mode and to be the full size of the tool, the dual monitors and more concentrated. And I don't know, no matter how I isolated it or tweaked it, I end up with that annoying stair-stepping in the lines, and it just looks haggard, which is too bad because I did the rest of the art with the pen and tablet. The rest of the character art, at least 10 years ago, it probably would have been on a different tablet, which is funny to think. Definitely a completely different computer. And yeah, it's just straight up clearly not going to work for this project. I eventually just had to throw that out and just go with a mouse. which I haven't really used a mouse for art in a long time, but you can tell right from like the first stroke, you know, Control Z a couple times in there, but it's just more confident. It came out more clean, and I just have to kind of get used to it. The characters up to this point, I've tried to do frame by frame and animation as much as possible. I just think it looks cleaner and would be kind of fun for this project. But there are characters who, you know, it made sense to use the line tool for Captain from Tankmen to have nice clean lines like the original animation, maybe tween things a little bit, but mostly I was doing frame by frame. I got permission from Puffballs to do Henry Stickmin. I thought that was really fun. I was excited to do it. One thing that I thought would be fun is to play around with the character design, even just a little bit. You know, he's a stick man. There's not a lot to play around with there. But what I ended up doing is taking his head from the latest Completing the Mission and using a chunkier body that I think was seen in maybe Infiltrating the Airship, maybe Fleeing the Complex. I kind of forget where I got the reference image. But I wanted to strike a balance of chunkier lined Henry and skinny line. I like the skinny line in the new game. I didn't think it would look as good in this game, so I went with the thicker lines there and the chunky salad fingers type fingers. I guess salad fingers would be a funny character to have in this. It probably came to mind at some point, but then it would start to feel closer and closer to having the same roster as Newgrounds Rumble, and I didn't want that. You can see Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Yeah, that's just any artist or animator is going to undo infinite numbers of times. But I started to kind of get more confident, get back into the groove of things a little bit, nailed down a character design. I'm using the purple scarf from the presumed dead ending of Fleeing the Complex. That seemed like a really obvious way to give him a more of a winter season look, and I started hand animating things. I figured the easiest approach would be to have a neutral starting position, which I wish was a little bit more engaged, you know, because right now he's standing really straight, but I made it quite far into the process before I decided I didn't like that, and I'd have to hand animate everything, so no thanks. So I have the neutral position, and then the end position of the lean or the trick, I draw one in between those, and so then you have the neutral, the extreme, and the in-between of the two, and then I tend to end with 5 total frames. And so you would think the natural thing would be to draw one between the first and second frame and one between the second and third. But what I'm doing here is creating a fake ease of the animation. So I make what is technically 1, 3, and 5, and then I insert 2 frames at the 4 position. Does that, I think that makes sense. And that slows down the tail end of the animation. I'm putting more concentration, more time spent on the end part of the movement, so it eases into the movement, or I guess that would be an ease out, because it starts fast, it's slow at the end. Usually I kind of cheat a little bit by only drawing 4 frames of animation, and the 4th one, the second last one, is just a slight skew and shift, just slightly off from the intended final animation. Sometimes I tweak that the tiniest bit more, but that's usually how I end up doing it. I was pretty proud once I got in the swing of things. I did the entirety of Henry in about 2 hours. There's a few frames of animation I'm not proud of. I think some of the tricks look better than others. I don't know if I really got the forced perspective of his trick right. The trick is a mute, by the way, because Henry doesn't really talk. I thought that was funny. But I tried to make his thighs and knees thicker by giving them this depth and perspective in the shot, and I don't know if I really sold that particularly well, but I kind of just have to move on. I have to start getting art done for this game, and I can come back and worry about it later. Like, maybe there will be some final tweaks to make, but for now I just kind of had to call it good, and I was quite happy with it. It's cool to have him in the game. I like the kind of in-between design choices, easily recognizable. Happy with that. Had a realization like 24 hours later, something cool I could do. Because the design is so simple, I legitimately just copied all the frames into a new file, swapped out the head specifically since it's its own movie clip. I literally just drew hair that I could then put on Henry's head. I made the eyebrows a bit different, the mouth a bit different. The eyes and the head are the same. Freehanding a circle sucks, so I just used the line tool for both versions of the character, I guess. And it's the only instance of this in the game, but it's like a palette swap, basically, and then you can just play as Ellie in the game as well. If I have time, she will get a unique third move, just to distinguish them a bit. But for now, it's just a swapped out head, swapped out colors for the scarf. Boom, now Ellie's in the game too. I thought that was kind of fun. Just a simple little trick. Totally different day. I tackled doing the art for Phil Eggtree. I was still stuck doing the art with the mouse, which was not my preference, but I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. I pulled in my own design of Phil from when I did Return to Riddle School. I also pulled in, these aren't like actual vector files, they're just off the internet, pictures of Phil from, I think it's Riddle Transfer 1 and 2, just as like extra references, something else to look at. Try to blend my own design from a few years ago with John's other designs. I ended up taking that head, which already has a freehand circle, or at least a tablet drawn circle, because I was not going to redraw that. I hate doing it. I think John uses the line tool. I'm not sure. I didn't want to freehand a circle again if I didn't have to. So I just stole that. But then I actually swapped out the colors to instead be those from Riddle Transfer 2, so it's a slightly more updated Phil look. It's closer to what people are most recently familiar with. I adjusted the eyes from my Return to Riddle School design to be bigger than what I originally had them as, but still not quite as big and a little bit wonkier than like those seen in John's official game. So I still feel like it feels a little bit like my style. Still just the tiniest bit, which is what I want. Right away, I knew that to give him a winter look, he's already wearing a sweater, a hoodie, so I would just make a hooded jacket. I did some rough outlining for that. I thought it was pretty simple, so I played around with that a little bit. I was happy with the concept quite quickly. Sketched out some thicker lines. Usually his legs are fully flat together. I tried to give him a little bit of action in how he was standing, but I didn't want to add like a bend to his knees because I like the illusion of this little kid with just his little tree trunk legs. So I didn't want to mess with that. This is a trick I've done before with Return to Riddle School, probably specifically is where I would have made the most use out of it. I take two colors that I like, two references, and I think, I want it to be something different than either of those. And so I took the sweater color from Riddle Transfer 1 and 2, created a gradient, selected a third color somewhere along that gradient that's in between the two. I ended up going towards one and the other, and then I used that for my own Phil. He kind of gets a unique color, but it's taken from his own game designs. Make some highs and lows, some lighter and darker ones for shadows and things like that. But then I realized he should have gloves. He's going to have freezing hands out there. I should give him some gloves. And I was like, well, what color can they be? What will look good with green? So what I did is I went to Riddle School 1 and I snagged the color off of Phil's original design and filled that in there. I filled it in. Wasn't planned. Filled, yes, I filled it in. I wanted to make sure it looked like there was some, elasticity around the wrists, that it was snug against there. I don't know, I was just playing around with things. It came together really quickly. I figured, I'm pretty happy with that. I know I'm going to tween this one instead, so I'll be using literal tween easing instead of faked easing with frame-by-frame animation. And I was like, I'll just start moving things around and see how it looks and feels, and I'll tweak the look and everything from there. And as it was coming together, all I could think is, oh man, tweening is so much easier. I was happy with how it all looked quite quickly. Like, I generally was really liking how the tricks were looking. I couldn't quite fudge the proportions in order to make him reach the two ends of the board as easily. With frame-by-frame animation, you can kind of, air a little extra stretch into the limb if you need him to reach out and grab the board, and it doesn't look insane because cartoons exaggerate things all the time. It does look bad with tweens, so I couldn't really do it. So the way he touches the edges is kind of lame. And then the move I chose for his third move is a UFO, going off of all the, the Zone 5.1 stuff. Is that what it's called in series? So I thought UFO would be funny, but that would be touching the nose and tail of the board at the same time, but with his little stumpy proportions, I couldn't really do that. I got as close as I could, and I was like, all right, here's where I start tweaking the design. Maybe this didn't come out quite how I wanted. It looks okay. And I thought, I'll try something here. I have an idea. Maybe I can give him a fake knee. And then if I superimpose that as his body just slides down over his legs, maybe I can fake that to make it look like there's a knee that comes up over his jacket. And I thought, I've never done anything like this, I don't think, but I imagine it'll look okay, and I can go from there. Bam. First attempt came out essentially exactly how I wanted, especially the more zoomed out you are. It looks worse when you're zoomed in, but it's crazy how quickly I was happy with it. And I thought, well, damn, I don't need to do anything there. You can see a little bit of wobbliness in the lines and everything, but if anything, that just adds to it and makes it look like there's some depth there, and there's like a cuff around the boot. I liked it right away. So I left it. I was happy with that. Couldn't believe how quickly that came together. It was 50 minutes from sketching the concept to drawing it to animating it, the full character. That was nuts. I don't think any of them went anywhere near that quickly. So in my mind, I have about 2 more that I want to try to do. I don't know if I'll time-lapse them because I don't know if I want to commentate on them, because I think both of them are going to be more tween-based again, so it would be quite repetitive. But hey, I'm almost done with all the character art at least. Here we have a new build that actually incorporates a different character, which is just fun to see. It creates a real feeling of things starting to be brought together. There's now a selection to play as. It does raise some questions about them all being different shapes and sizes and how they're going to sit within the snowboard, and it might cause some major issues, and I'm a little worried about that, but we'll figure that out as we add more characters. It's cool to actually see these generated slopes in action. They're made much less random this time around, trying to tone that down just the tiniest bit so that it's not just a bunch of chaotic randomness that just bumps you all over like a rocky road. Right now I think the acceleration downhill is probably too fast. You just get rocketing forward at a certain point, and then because of that, every little bump sends you a million miles in the air. Once you're airborne, the controls and rotation and everything are feeling really good, but we probably need to slow down the acceleration, maybe increase the gravity. I'm also wondering if the character should be made smaller, so they're just like a little fraction of the screen and you can see more of the slope in front of you. You can anticipate and maybe plan a little bit rather than just reacting to the ways you get tossed up in the air. But these elements are coming together. It's starting to feel like a game. You could slap some point systems on this and upload it, and I think it would pass through getting blamed on Newgrounds. It's not winning any daily awards, people are probably not going to leave it very favorable reviews, but this is an interesting step. It's like a pivotal point where this is now a game, and that's really exciting to see. Now I'm recording this 2 months after the last little segment I would have done. Obviously, the game jam strategy didn't pan out. I drew a bunch of new characters, a couple, I don't know, not that many, I guess. And we've had a few different builds for the game since. I'm covering a few different videos. I'll make sure on screen it says when they are from. It's been such small little things here and there when either of us feel that we have the time. I thought about scrapping, the part of the video where I talk about the game jam strategy, but I think it's better to represent the truth of game development and how messy and unpredictable and how often you just make and ditch plans. It seemed best to include all that. There's a little bit of a character selection screen kind of taking shape there. It's all placeholder stuff. We realized we needed to zoom way out. You couldn't really tell what was going on in the game. There's some simple trick performances. All these goofy circles on the terrain are a way of testing the ability to mask in different things that I could potentially draw to then have move along with the terrain to add a little bit more variety and break up that pattern a bit. So things are starting to come together. It has a game feel to it. You can move and go down the slope, kind of do tricks. It's something. The next build that came after that started to play around with, okay, if we are entirely going to generate the terrain using awesome programming techniques that I don't remotely understand, but that are way more functional and provide so much more potential, then we should think of ways to make that look more exciting. And MSG totally found this cool way to draw in the snow over top of the terrain to make it look like something, and I'm very happy with that. It's much better than just plain purple, and it just gives us so much more options compared to what we were working with before. You can also now in this version crash, although when you crash it kind of just starts looping a section of the animation for doing a nose grab, I think. So whenever you see the character just repeatedly doing that, that's a stand-in for crashing. Ideally, you'll separate from the snowboard, you'll both go flying, you'll both go tumbling down the slope for a little while, and then you'll get a pop-up asking you if you want to try again. In approximately the span of a month, no new progress had really been made, and we decided two things. One, Pico Day can be our new target. We're obviously not getting this out in time for winter. It actively is spring right now. And so for it to feel at all timely or appropriate, if we release it alongside Pico Day, celebrating Newgrounds at the end of April, that could be perfect. I also just realized I don't have the time to do everything that needs to be done for this game. The Carpet Baker is a relatively new user to the site. They created the Riddle School tribute game I'm Outta Here for the Flash Forward Game Jam. Very strong art style, very exciting for a young talent to put something like that together. I was very impressed. I reached out and asked if they were interested in maybe contributing art to this game. The timing worked out great. They had a window of opportunity to contribute to this project, and I said, awesome. I want you to go wild with this, and I'm giving up a lot of ownership of the project because I just don't have the time to maintain that level of control, and we might as well get some fresh ideas in here. Within that same day, he presented me with this piece of concept art where he just drew over top of the demo to kind of give a sense of what he envisioned, and come on, that outclasses my own art by so much. I think this looks incredible. I'm so happy with it. The game is going to look phenomenally better. But there was a bit of miscommunication, and I totally take blame for that. That this is hand-drawn terrain. They were picturing doing tile sets, which is funny because that's where we started out with things. And I had to say, oh no, we are generating it using the engine, and so we have to come up with a way to work around that. But it got us all talking, and we realized, well, maybe there's a way to use that drawn terrain as a mask and still use this new texture. And lo and behold, that was an option. The white snow cap on top of that looked a little weird. We started playing around with, okay, what if you apply a shadow? What if you draw an outline around it? The outline added in, I think, makes a huge difference. These small little changes are adding up in such big ways, and the game just took this massive leap forward of looking infinitely more polished. You could put a background behind this and, get a 2 out of 5 star playable game. Quick check-in on some incremental progress that's being made. It really helps having another artist, although at this point I still don't think he will have seen anything that the Carpet Baker would have put in. Let's grab girlfriend. Ooh. Sometimes when you click it twice, it loads 2 instances. Alright, maybe the character selection doesn't work at all right now. That's something I'm working on drawing and creating. I should record. I should record some of the menu designing. The MSG worried that this might happen, that the top speed is a little bit too high right now and you get crazy airtime, but we added the ability for you to be able to control a small hop, so you have a little bit more freedom over how you interact with things. And this probably isn't quite finished yet, but we want to add a railing so that you can grind on it, add another way to kind of accumulate points and interact with things. The idea is that the grinding will act as a little mini game, and there'll be a little bar that slides that you have to keep balanced. And then if you fail it, then you wipe out. I like that the game is fast. We kind of always wanted the game to be fast, but we gotta work on the scale and everything. So it's again now back to being really hard to tell what's going on. Now that more dynamic slopes are being drawn, right now it still is, it's very, very simplistic, but we're working on making it more complex. I feel like he basically just has to tweak a variable to make that happen. Having the jumping and grinding in is cool. I like the feel of it. adds a little bit more variety. It's like borderline difficult to wipe out. I feel like I'm just doing successful without having to try it all. There's a wipeout. I don't think I'm going to be able to draw as many wipeouts as I thought I was going to. I was going to have them redrawn like 3 frames per character, kind of like how characters bounce and distort and toss the turtle to show them taking damage and getting wailed on. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Instead, I'm probably going to draw like a snowball with like limbs sticking out of it, very cartoonified, and that'll just roll down the slope a little ways. Right now, I have 14 characters drawn, and now that we have someone else doing backgrounds and everything, I'm basically entirely on character art, and the goal is to have 20, which is just like a huge number. I think that'll be really exciting. We are like 10 days away from Pico Day, and you know, this is playable, but it's not a game. You don't accumulate points. There's no menus. There's no sound effects. There's no particle effect. It's not much of anything, and I'm excited to hopefully make dramatic progress in like the coming week. I'm recording this a little bit after the fact for the sake of this storefront time lapse. It was just under an hour spent on this because I mostly had things figured out. I had already rescaled it to fit this size of screen because before it was like a totally different dimension, whatever was kind of seen as standard back 10 years ago. Stretched that out, kind of moved things around it, make it feel comfortable, I guess, just fit things however I could. It took a fair bit of tinkering. I continually wasn't happy. Micro adjustments to, oh, that should be a bit bigger. Oh, that should be a bit smaller. Oh, right, I have to fit in the ability to like buy things. And where is that going to go? And does that deserve its own screen? Would it be more convenient if that existed simply within the character select? Which, yes, that is what we eventually ended up going with. I also drew out 22 spaces for characters. I don't even think at the time we had landed on 20. That was kind of the direction things were going, but I just thought that I had worked it out that it was, I think, 8 and 12 or something, and then immediately, like later on, I realized, oh no, that's not at all. That's not at all how that worked. I had to select heads of every individual character and set all those different buttons to then be able to display their heads. That took a little bit of effort, trying to make sure I didn't screw up any existing assets or any of that. I had to make a little lock icon for when you haven't actually purchased a character yet. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to it. It's not a very interesting part of the process. And it was mostly just about getting the feel and the proportions and the just the layout of things handled. And I feel like that sort of UI design is not a strong suit of mine. So I tried my best. Not sure if it's perfect, but I think it's functional. I'm relatively happy with functional. Here is the earliest example of the storefront being implemented. It's, you know, doesn't quite work a little bit, maybe. This is, I believe, also the first implementation. Maybe the grind rails were there already. I think it's the first example of the grind rails. They're being automatically generated. At one point, we thought it would be fun if like the slope went one way and the rails went another, and it created this feeling of having 2 independent paths. And it was very complex and it wasn't working, and for the sake of getting the game done, it's not the route we went. But it's cool because it's yet again, you can like witness it being generated as you're snowboarding down. I want to say skiing as you're snowboarding down, and that's just kind of cool. It's a neat effect, and we'll have grinding as its own separate way of earning points. You can jump to hop up onto the grind rails now. Yeah, that's where that left off. It is the night before Pico Day. We're in crazy crunch time trying to get this done. We're just cutting things left and right. Like, we're only going to have 2 unique backgrounds. We're not going to have a stat system, which is a little bit of a bummer because I was a little bit excited about that. The idea of having like speed, acceleration, rotation, grinding. I don't even know if I've talked about grinding. That's a thing that has been like conceived of and potentially cut again since. But the idea was, you know, you're grinding on a rail and then you have this little bar that's continually sliding its way around and you have to keep tapping the left and right buttons to try and keep it centered there. It would like change color to warn you that you're green, you're still a little safe. Yellow, be worried. Red, panic, you're about to fail, it's falling apart. That might not make it in. There's a few things though that we're trying to think like, all right, but we could patch that in like the next day, maybe like a third background, something simple like that. We do that last minute, but really we just want to have it done, and we're excited about having it done, and so we're just focusing on that. The main page here, 20 full characters to select, which is a lot, and it was 6 of them or something were fully drawn and animated in the last like day or two, and then we came up with ways to squeeze in like a buying button and different things like that. There also needs to be unique icons for the individual collections of every character. It took more time than you would think to put that together. It's funny, this square, very small, only 46 by 46 pixels originally. I've scaled it up slightly. Very, very small. That was the original icon size on Newgrounds. And when I started this game 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever it was at this point now, that's what it was. When I pulled that off of Newgrounds to put in the game, that's what it was. That's what was available to me. And now all of a sudden going back, well, these icons don't exist anymore. They've all been replaced by upscaled versions. I had to fake a couple of them because like the breaking the bank icon was atrocious. It was so grainy and so small. And I had to go back using the Wayback Machine to dig these up. They didn't export properly and I had to like clean them up. It's so stupid, and I should have just, I don't know, redesigned it. A game like Dead Estate is too new. It never had that icon, but I faked it. It's fine. It works. That was more work than you would expect. The controls are here rather than having a separate tutorial. Doesn't really need a tutorial. It's going to be an easy to understand game. Hopefully, full roster of characters laid out. There was a few last minute changes and tweaks and things like that. I have roulette on there because I want Dene's third move to be titled something unique. That's not at all a snowboarding move. There's like 1-footer tricks in snowboarding. It's not called a roulette. It's one of the few tricks in the game that isn't, named after a real snowboarding trick. I had trouble with Kerrigan, trying to redesign her in some way. I tried to give her more clothes because she kind of wears the see-through material that I think would be terrible in the winter. But I had fun animating her because I shape-tweened a skirt for her and all these moves. I've deleted it since, but I drew stick limbs so that I could get a sense of the shape and the positioning of the skirt for each different thing, but then kind of shape-tweened it around to fit those legs that were drawn in, but they were like sketchy, crappy. I knew I was going to delete them. Here's another one. That's the gorilla to both hands in front, grab the edge of the board in snowboarding. We're going to call it the Froggy for legendary frog who made the character. What Shotgun Man is an exciting one. The like mascot of the old Assassin series on Newgrounds. That's going way back. That's a deep pull. I think it's fun to have him. Crinkles was down to have a Madness character. We agreed Tricky would be fun, especially since Hank, just gets so much love. We got Cordelia, the Dead Estate witch. Decided it would be a good chance to tie that character in. The CarpetBaker's original character, Josh. And at the very end here, which I think it's more cleaned up here. This is kind of funny because it's actually easier to animate a rotate than it is to program one in with physics. It would have been cool to do it with physics, but we decided not to worry about it. Instead of drawing unique frames for every character, which at one point was the plan, and that's probably come up in these little blogs of documenting progress. At one point I was going to draw a couple versions of each character for their wipeouts. Instead, it's just an assemblage of their limbs and head sticking out of the snowball. When the snowball has pinged off the ground a few times, it does a quick burst and the character's free to start riding again. What else have I worked on? Random little things. So we realized there's no way to indicate to a character when it feels like you're done or when you should ever take a step back. So there's a back button so you can go back whenever you choose. But if you wipe out 3 times, which after each wipeout these guys will gray themselves out, then you get this pop-up screen, which is supposed to be reminiscent of the old like Newgrounds preloader, not nearly as fancy. It was quite quickly done. But then you have the option after 3 wipeouts, retry or go back to the store, just like keep playing or not. And in the moment, had so much fun with this because it was just going to say, wipe out or try again or something. And I was like, what if I was mean? What if I was mean with it? And what if I gave lots of options? You know, we have to cut major features. The least we could do is add minute, easy to implement things that make the game feel like there's a bit more going on. You stink. Boo earns. Simpsons reference that I love. Yikes. Sick wipeout. That's supposed to be a little bit like, it sounds positive, but it's not. It should be an insult. You should take it negatively. You're hopeless. What a dork. Was that on purpose? No style points here. Sick. The bad kind. Truly awful. Worse than my spelling. You make me want to cry. Tankman reference. I did 50 of those and hammered those out in, 5 minutes. First things that came to my mind, a few just insults, a few random jokes, a few references, a few Newgrounds references, and then a few kind of Easter eggs. But I made 50 of them. It's going to select them at random. Odds are people are not going to see all of them. And, it was going to be 20. And then I was like, well, 20's pretty good, but people could see all 20. What's a number I could strive for where people might not see them all? So I made it 50. If anyone picks this up and plays and wants to make themselves a spreadsheet to keep track and see if they can find them all, there's 50. So it would be, you would have to wipe out minimum 150 times. So I don't think people are gonna find them all, and I like that. That's such a fun last minute thing I could sprinkle into this. This was just a terrible attempt. I thought it would be funny to take a picture of a real snowboarder. He had a red jacket. I changed it to green and painted his hair orange. I don't know. Maybe we'll still go with this. It's kind of funny, but it kind of looks terrible. I'm not happy with how that came together. Just kind of a salvage job I was going for. The preview though, potentially the last preview we're gonna see before the final game here. Preloaders going in, menus going in, a few last features, but tomorrow, game should be finished. So this is the alpha. I guess the beta at this point? I don't even know. It's near done. Oh, I totally forgot that MSG said they grabbed a couple music tracks off the portal to implement. So we got some of that. The descriptions are just not in for any character, but hey, the collection icons are there for every character. And there's a little something goofy that happens anytime you're in between the actively selected character. Hey, but that works. You do remain selected, so you can technically select and play as any character. Honestly, the girlfriend winterized design is maybe my favorite thing I did with this entire game. I'm just so damn happy with that. I'm gonna save playing as the goat for the final rendition, the final go around. Let's play around with Cordelia. Apparently we've had some changes to the engine. Okay, so there's the first wipeout. It was a pretty quick early wipeout. Maybe I'm moving the screen around. Point tracking hasn't really properly been implemented yet, so there's just there is some point tracking actually. It all just crashed on me, so that's it's a good sign, Oh no, I'm not sure why the up and down arrow are moving the screen. That makes things incredibly difficult. Oh, issues. Well, let's just try a different character. Oh, juicy. This is working exactly how it's meant to. This is the sort of condition I thought it might be in at this point. I don't know how easy this is gonna be to clean up. I'm so sorry to MSG who has to program this, because it's clearly gonna be a headache for the next 12 hours. I have no idea. It's so close. It's so close to being a game, and you look at it here and so far. This is the day of Pico Day. There's a pretty strong chance the game isn't going to be released on time today, but at least it should be out this weekend. Tomorrow will be Sunday. I think we're all totally happy with that and quite tired. One of the last things I could have done was written descriptions for every character to be on the storefront page there. There's nothing to show there, so I've already done it. And instead, what I have a time lapse of here is doing a handful of board designs. I set aside a little bit of time to hammer out some of these. I would have liked to have gotten more done. Luckily, we have a second artist, CB's, out there doing a few designs as well. They can't be too complex because it's so narrow. There's not a lot of room to fit things on. And in a way, I kind of like that because at one point, you know, in that menu screen, I had that just atrocious picture. I don't know, I look back at it now and I don't like it. A 10-year-old tracing of Pico with like the Newgrounds logo squeezed onto the board, and I thought it looked so stupid and so crappy, and it takes up so little of the board space, you know? I never really liked the look of that. And so now, instead of trying to cram entire things onto the board, it's about getting the feel of it, the design, a few key elements of it, and I think that's fun to play around with. Now would be a good time to show that CB did a totally new iteration of that main menu Pico, like grabbing the edge of his board and woo, doing a big trick. Looks 1,000 times better, way more stylistic, just fits the game a lot more than a tracing ever was going to. This is probably going to be like the icon of the game now because like it looks so much better. I had fun pulling up the different things for this, like my first one there where I thought that I'll just paste the Newgrounds Rumble texture right in there. No one will know that's what I did, but maybe a few people will pick up on the fact that that's what it's like referencing, and it looked so haggard, so I ended up having to draw something and interpreting that, and you know, I feel like that turned out. The Dad and Me one, that was easy. Salad Fingers was maybe the first design that came to mind. I knew that's one that I was gonna do for certain, and so like I was trying to just ride inspiration, and then the second I hit a little bit of like I guess a writer's block, an artist's block, I was like, I'll draw that one because I know exactly what I'm gonna do for it. I wanted to incorporate characters that are part of the larger Newgrounds lore without doing the exact characters that are in the game. And then I think I knew I was going to do Peabod as well. I tried a few different things with shading. It all looked terrible. And then I was kind of just fully down the line of like, well, I'll just keep doing things inspired by characters. Alien Hominid was an easy, obvious one. I straight up stole a texture for that one to kind of have that Newgrounds glow. Maybe that one won't make it in the final game, or we'll tweak it or something, because it does look kind of stupid. I thought, you know, we have Pico and Nene in there. Let's get Darnell in there, in some way at least. And I am actually really happy with how that board design came together. I think it looks quite cool. And I think people who know what they're looking for will get it. And then, you know, I was running out of steam. I'm tired. I was tired. I am tired now. And I was like, oh, Strawberry Clock. I want to have a single clock crew thing in this game. And I always really liked the design of the character in this old Portal image that Newgrounds had that was like a cast of Newgrounds characters. I always thought that looked really cool with the crown, so that was kind of my main inspiration rather than the more flat looking version of the character. I like almost forgot to put the clock on there, but I slipped Strawberry Clock in. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what designs CB comes up with. Maybe I'll try and do a few more, but that's all I feel like I can fit in right now. I'll show the latest build of the game actually, because we're about as near done with this as we can be. There's actually a preloader there. Oh, okay, there is and there isn't. It was because there's a % being added in the bottom left finally to show how far loaded it is, and then it just skipped to this screen. Oh yeah, there you can see, like, I like the graffiti-ness of it, but it's a bad board design, I think. I don't know. Maybe it would look better on a real snowboard. Oh yeah, I forgot the game has music now. So here you go, a full list of characters. We ended up, apparently we have the full names of the characters in the game there. I think we kind of need to leave room for the ability to buy characters. But, you know, maybe maybe the store is getting cut. I don't even know. We're pushing it. We're really pushing it here. So maybe there is no store anymore, you know? I'll play as Johnny. Is Johnny Magic his name? I don't even, like, remember that, honestly. Here we go. Look at that. What a beautiful background. I'm actually so stoked with the background. There's Supposedly, see, it moves the whole screen, so that's bunk in some way. You can see it like adds up your points and things as you put together a grind, and then adds it in the bottom left there. The rotation has been tweaked, so you know the rotation should be kind of fixed. I guess I would say you probably shouldn't get the points for that flip when you wipe out. Yeah, the way that the slopes have been programmed has been changed, and so it's a little bit more randomized with the slopes than it was previously. We'll have to see about disengaging the arrows so it doesn't move everything like that. Oh, see, a flip, but it didn't count the grab. The flip was kind of one of the main things, though, that we thought would be tricky. It's just kind of hard from a programming perspective to think about how that would be implemented. It's harder to land some of those. That's really funny that rare prompt is the one that came up, and I can kind of like admit right now that it is no more rare than the rest. It's a 1 in 50 chance, just like the rest of them. So then you would be able to hop back to the store, spend the points that you've earned. So, you know, that's like not really in place. We have the 2 different backgrounds. It has different soundtracks to roll through, which is nice. The accumulation of points the whole time you're grinding is good, even if we don't have the grinding minigame. Aha, see there it's chaining together. You know, you managed to do... It's specifically indicating, you know, 1 flip. I should double check that it does know to log like multiple flips. I'm gonna have to build speed back up again now that we got some actual gameplay going on here. Oh, I barely landed that. That was pretty messed up. I was risking it maybe a bit too much. Ooh, the grinding almost feels like it builds up some speed. Oh, I didn't know, you get more speed going the other way. If you tail grab and rotate, you know, you get that little extra juice in there. Come on, get moving, guy. That was a double flip. The double flip, I honestly don't know how the points are being scored. Whether or not, like, you know, each flip is worth the same amount, or, you know, 1 flip is 100, 2 flips is 200. Maybe it scales up. I don't actually know how any of that's being calculated. That's all under the hood stuff that we just kind of had to, like, totally just a MSG's court to figure that out. It'll infinitely just roll you down the hill while you're waiting to decide if you're going to retry. Yeah, it's like a complete game. It has some like iffiness to it. A lot of things we want to have in the game aren't there. But you know, this was not a game, and now it is. And that's exciting in ways that are hard to put into words. So it's the next morning. It's the day after, May 2nd. The game was submitted last night around like midnight. I think I can check. It's here. A game is pushed through the portal a lot faster. People are just more often looking for that type of content, I think. So it's already passed through judgment, whereas this stupid thing that I did in like no time at all is still sitting under judgment from hours and hours and hours earlier. It was 3 a.m. I guess it depends on the time zone. I think locally for me it was closer to 1 or 2 a.m. actually. Yeah, it was late. It was late. We decided to make the game open source. Why not? Yeah, isn't it just like you know, Pico Day tradition for half the uploads to come the day after? It's within the same weekend. I think it's fine. You know, there's quite a few things that didn't make it into the game. There's medals, which is exciting. That was like a pretty last minute addition. The arrow troubles should be totally fixed. I think that'll slide across the screen. That's pretty funny. I didn't realize that wasn't there. I was just tired, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna go to bed and I'll look at this in the morning. The reception's pretty good. People's complaints are exactly the sort of thing that I thought they might be. You know, there's not a ton of variety to it. The menus and things are really lacking in terms of having like fun beeps and boops and things moving around and like pop-ups and satisfying sound effects and things to really sell all the different components. So, you know, it doesn't have a lot of that sort of stuff, but that's fine, because I'm so proud of what we did get into the game. This that you're hearing now, totally unexpected addition, CarpetBakery out of nowhere made a remix of the endless handbag loop specifically for the menu of this game, and I love that so much. That's like so
beyond, like, no one knew they were doing it. We just logged in and they dropped a link and they were like, I thought this might be good for the menu. So that's so awesome. I'm very excited about that. You start with the ability to buy any singular game for free. So obviously I'm going to start by buying the goat. I will buy them to play as. There are a few different boards. The different boards made it into the game. I showed those off quite recently. And we decided to put in the one from the main menu. Even though it's like not a great design, everything's so squished. It's like a callback to within game. CarpetBakery came up with this one. It's like Friday Night Funkin' colors inspired by Hattie. The Super Meat Boy one turned out really good. I really like that. This one, that seems so familiar to me, but I'm not picking up on it right away. We also thought it was funny to just leave the plain whiteboard in there for like your starting. I could save up, I could buy something. My personal favorite is probably the Alien Hominid board. I really, really like the Super Meat Boy one. I'm pretty proud of the Strawberry Clock one too, actually, when I look at that now. All of them are 5,000. Each subsequent character unlock costs more, so you're starting with the cheapest one and it just kind of goes up from there. Good, I could jump without moving the screen around. That's one of the biggest things that we needed to like build up to. And at this point, I honestly don't know if we plan to like add more to the game. It's totally uncertain. Maybe minute tiny things. I do want to purposely wipe out. I got saved by the guard. I also realized I didn't do what I intended to do there, because what I wanted to do was flip. I like seeing him wrapped up in his little snowball. Oh, I'm not sure if he burst out of it. That might not quite have made it in. There was some pretty frantic last-minute sharing of details. Oh, okay, so it logs the flip once you've landed it instead of tracking it as you're going, but it at least doesn't award you points in the air like it used to, because that was a bit of a problem, is that it would give you the points while you did like 3 flips in the air, and then even if you crashed, you still got the points. So it doesn't have that anymore. So let's try and actually try and put this game to the test. Try and earn some actual points. The grinding mini game would have been great to have. That would have been a nice addition. That would have been one of the soonest things I chose. Ooh, I do kind of want to see. Yeah, the board doesn't animate with the 360 the way it was originally intended, but the way we ended up utilizing the board in-game is not really attached to the player exactly. Oh, there's something really satisfying about flipping and doing 360s like that. That was fun. Yeah, so the board doesn't flip, and so it's a little strange that the character is kind of like seemingly doing it without actually detaching themselves, or like without the board moving along with them. They just kind of detach themselves from the board. Oh, just barely. But this is like a very fully functioning game. 10 years in the making. What are all the classic examples of games that spent way too long in development? And like, I don't know, things like Cuphead. Cuphead's got nothing on this. Or Eagle Island, I think, is a game that quite famously spent a lot of time. I gotta land this and cash those points. I had too much building up. I didn't want to risk it by suddenly wiping out. Oh yeah, this is so much what I wanted. I was too ballsy and tried to throw in a little extra there. But you could go back. We could chuck. Let's do the Alien Hominid board, because I do like that one. Buy the board, and what other character? I don't know. I'll buy Tricky the Clown, and then the next one's 3,000. I think it's 1,500 with each additional character. So in that way, we have like. It's not seemingly not cycling between backgrounds. I think it randomly selects them rather than cycling, and so the fact that we're only getting the one is just kind of bad luck, I suppose. This is we tried to brainstorm different backgrounds that Carpet could do. We had the Newgrounds Tankman-esque inspired one that we've seen in a different video. There was meant to be a couple. I think we trimmed it back to 2 just for the sake of time. But this one is actually Alien Hominid. You can see his spaceship there, their spaceship in the background. It's kind of covered, and it's kind of, you know, tucked away in a way where it should be covered most of the time. There's also like the Russian castle or whatever it is. I don't remember the specific lore of that game. It's funny that as soon as I bring up the spaceship, it's been behind the mountain entirely. There it is, peeking out behind when I jump. Yeah, so just more Newgrounds-y references tucked in. Is it the flashiest game? No, there's not even like sound effects for going downhill. There's not a bunch of like fun pop-ups on screen. At one point there was going to be the grinding minigame. There was going to be like tasks, like, oh, do a triple flip, and then, you know, you would cash in the points for doing that task, and it would assign you a new task. You have a few tasks on the go at once, pretty typical of Infinite Runners, or, you know, like, what would they be called? Launcher-based games. And so we didn't really have time to put all that sort of stuff in. But like, this is really awesome, and the fact that the ground is being generated randomly is very cool, and even like the snow effect, it all looks really good. That's all made open source, and so in a way I'm quite proud of that, even though that wasn't initially like a part of things. Ooh, it might have froze up on me there. That's not great. Oh, I guess we just did away with there would have been a menu here where, you know, you would select play or credits or things like that, and I guess we just didn't put that in. Kind of like completely forgot. These actually do link you to different collections if you want to like follow up with those characters. So yeah, that's a nice thing that we have in the game, I guess. We should probably try to get our credits in there somewhere, just in case people start ripping it off Newgrounds. Want to make sure that's not totally lost. Yeah, there's the full development saga of Newgrounds Snowboarding, warts and all the compromises and cuts made along the way. It was fun to put together kind of a mini documentary and kind of show the full start to finish experience of what working on an online game might look like, especially when you got some self-imposed deadlines and such. I haven't attempted editing any of this video yet. I'm anticipating it's going to be quite long, so it's like documentary length. I guess maybe that lives up to the legacy of a 10-year game, even if the end resulting game is quite small. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you even more to CarpetBakery and MSGHero for working on this game with me, for taking something that I've had sitting on a back burner for a decade and allowing me to actually put this out, my like love letter to Newgrounds, and helping me make it more than I hoped it could be. It's a little bit emotional, honestly. The character selection in so many ways is still influenced by like the sort of things that were popular on Newgrounds at the time, and like active users and things like that. And so I really like the time capsule quality of like so much of it carrying forward from where it was at. Like this was the icon size on uploads in 2011. I don't think it had been upscaled yet. And that's things like that are just very satisfying for me personally in my own like experience on Newgrounds. So it's a pleasure to be able to share that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to patrons of the channel. I'll see you all again soon.